Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki Sharma. Let's get started. Sri Lanka is tense once again. A pre-dawn crackdown has shaken up the protesters in Colombo. Last night, thousands of troops were on the streets. The Sri Lankan military raided the main camp of the protesters. They were removed by force. The pictures speak for themselves. It was a violent crackdown. It overshadowed the Prime Minister's oath-taking ceremony today. President Wickremesinghe is telling the world that he's firmly in control. He has kept almost all of the old cabinet faces in the government. Wickremesinghe himself holds three powerful positions now. He's the president of Sri Lanka. He's also the finance minister and the defense minister. Is Wickremesinghe wielding his power to end the chaos in Sri Lanka, or does his elevation mean more of the same? On Gravitas tonight, we'll discuss the crisis in Sri Lanka. What you just saw happen last night, anti-government protesters were raided. The Sri Lankan military led this crackdown and they were in riot gear, carrying assault rifles. The military entered the protest site by force. They tore down the camp set up by protesters. A new Prime Minister took oath of office in Colombo today, but the swearing-in was overshadowed by this violent crackdown. More than 50 people were hurt. Many were sent to hospital. Remember, Sri Lanka is under an emergency. Its new president, Ranil Wickremesinghe, has come down hard on protesters. He's labelled them fascists. Is this the making of another violent showdown in Sri Lanka? What happens to the plans of reviving the economy? Will politics and crackdowns derail those plans? Does Ranil Wickremesinghe have a plan to get that elusive IMF bailout? The turmoil in Sri Lanka is our cover story tonight. We'll begin with what happened last night, a crackdown in the heart of Colombo. There were thousands of troops and cops. They executed a cleanup. They removed tents near two key sites with force: the Presidential Secretariat building and the offices of the president. Now, these are the buildings that the protesters had stormed last week. They wanted to force Gotabaya Rajapaksa to step down, and they got their wish. Gota fled the premises before the protesters came in, and then he fled the country. The former president of Sri Lanka is on the run. But the protesters were still where they were. They hadn't vacated the areas near the Presidential Secretariat. This is the place from where the Lankan government runs. The protesters had turned it into a museum, a thoroughfare. They did promise to hand back the buildings, and that handover was supposed to take place this afternoon, but the government chose not to wait for that. It took control by force. The protesters say they're not happy. Their protest is still on.
They came towards us. We were like about 5 people. They came towards us and they dragged my phone and deleted the footage that I was recording. And when my friend tried to sort of protect me and put his arm around me, They grabbed my friend, attacked him, beat him up, and then took him away. They didn't arrest him. They were keeping him somewhere in a building. So this is definitely not what we want. Ranil Wickremesinghe is not the democratic leader that he's trying to show to the world.
They're angry with this man, the new president, Ranil Wickremesinghe. He ordered the crackdown. After taking oath as president, he's trying to take back control. One of his first actions was to declare an emergency. Sri Lanka's armed forces and police have sweeping powers now. They can arrest and detain citizens without charge, and that's never a good thing anywhere in the world. Wickremesinghe's next act was to name a prime minister. He picked his old schoolmate for the job, Dinesh Gunawardene. He is considered to be a stalwart in Lankan politics. Gunawardena has served as an education and foreign minister. He was in fact Home Minister in the Rajapaksa government. He held 3 more portfolios: public administration, provincial councils and local governments. And he's going to keep all these portfolios in addition to serving as the Prime Minister of Sri Lanka. Who else is in Wickremesinghe's cabinet? More or less the old lot. As Prime Minister, Wickremesinghe had the additional charge of the Finance Ministry. He will keep that portfolio. Plus, he has inherited the Defence portfolio. Now remember, as President, Gotabaya Rajapaksa controlled the Defence Ministry. Now Wickremesinghe is President, so he's got it. And he hasn't appointed a new Defence Minister, which means for the time being, he will control this ministry. And look at the sharp turn of events in Sri Lanka. Just a few days back, Wickremesinghe was an embattled leader. Angry protesters had set his home on fire. He'd even promised to resign as Prime Minister. Today, he's Sri Lanka's most powerful leader, President, Finance Minister and Defence Minister. Wickremesinghe has the most important portfolios. Guess who else is back in government? Ali Sabri. He is the new Foreign Minister. You may remember him. Sabri was the reluctant Finance Minister under Gotabaya Rajapaksa. He took up the job and then resigned a day later. He was considered to be close to the Rajapaksas. He will now serve under Ranil Wickremesinghe. So this isn't really an all-party government. This is mostly the old government. But the opposition is not complaining. They're promising constructive support to Wickremesinghe. So for now, the new Sri Lankan government looks stable. They now have the difficult task of stabilizing their country. The first priority is a bailout from the IMF. The government will have to revive the dialogue. India has assured full support in this. India said it will stand by the people of Sri Lanka. What about China? Well, Beijing is the biggest roadblock for Wickremesinghe at the moment, and I'll explain why I say this. The IMF has imposed a precondition for a bailout. Sri Lanka needs to restructure its debt with every lender. The loan period needs to be extended. Colombo's financial commitments need to be made more sustainable. Only then will the IMF bail Sri Lanka out. And China is the biggest obstacle in this process because no one really knows how much money Sri Lanka owes to China. Officially, China accounts for just 10% of Sri Lanka's total debt. And reports say this is just government-to-government debt, meaning what Colombo has directly taken from Beijing. This is the money they have to pay to China. But Sri Lanka has taken loans from Chinese financial institutions too. And it has to restructure those loans as well. How much are those loans worth? Nobody has the exact figure. Sri Lankan economists have offered a broad estimate. They believe the value of Chinese loans is double that of the official numbers. Double the official numbers. The Chinese debt accounts for at least 20% of Sri Lanka's total debt. Will China restructure all these loans? Beijing has been in fact less than willing to help Colombo out during this crisis. For months, Sri Lanka has been requesting for a credit line from China. Colombo has access to a $1.5 billion credit line with China, but they cannot use this money. That's because it doesn't have any cash in its reserves. In contrast, India has been a reliable partner for Sri Lanka. Since January, India has extended a series of credit lines. It has given Sri Lanka financial assistance worth more than $3.5 billion. But China has refused to help out Sri Lanka in any way. Today, it congratulated Ranil Wickremesinghe. The Chinese Foreign Ministry sent a message to Colombo. It said, China wants to renew a dialogue with Sri Lanka. Will this translate into tangible assistance? It's safe to say that Sri Lankans don't have high expectations this time. What Sri Lanka needs more than anything else at the moment is unity. The government and the people must be on the same page for things to progress. If not, the policies will fail. And why just Sri Lanka? Any government policy, in fact, requires unity. Take Europe, for instance. Russia is waging a war in their backyard, but Europe cannot decide how to respond. There is a lack of unity on most issues, on sending weapons, on buying Russian oil, on rationing energy. Every European Union member has its own agenda. Normally, this wouldn't be a problem. Countries do put their self-interest above morals and principles. But the EU does not have that luxury. We are talking about 27 countries tightly bound together. They use a common market, a common currency, and common legal frameworks. So disunity in the European Union is not a setback. It is fatal. I'll give you some examples. This week, the European Commission unveiled a proposal to ration energy. Every country must reduce gas consumption by 15%. That's the proposal. But member states are pushing back. At least 12 countries are opposing this proposal, 12 out of 27. Among them is Spain. Listen to what their energy minister said, and I'm quoting. "We will defend European values, but we won't accept a sacrifice regarding an issue that we have not even been allowed to give our opinion on." So Spain says they were not consulted, which is fair criticism, but that's not the real reason behind their opposition. You see, only 10% of Spain's gas comes from Russia, only 10% of their supply. 34% comes from the US, 25% from Algeria, and 14% from Nigeria. So Spain is not really affected by Russian gas cuts. Hence the opposition. Not our gas, not our problem. Poland has also refused to support this 15% cut. Do you know why? Because they have stored enough gas. Poland has filled their storages to 98% capacity. By winter, it could increase even more. So their government is not open to rationing. They have enough gas for the upcoming winter. Poland's neighbor Hungary is also opposing the proposal, but their reason is entirely different. Hungary's gas storage is at 47% capacity, which means they will struggle in the winter. But instead of rationing energy, Hungary wants to buy more Russian gas. Their foreign minister visited Moscow today. He proposed buying 1 billion cubic meters of gas from Russia.
First of all, I would like to talk about how to make Hungary's energy supply more secure in the coming months. This is one of the most important issues of our bilateral cooperation. And in the current international situation, the most important thing for us is to ensure Hungary's energy security. Therefore, I would like to talk today and agree on increasing the volumes of gas already supplied to Hungary from Russia.
How about that? Europe's plan is to gradually abandon Russian natural gas, but their member state Hungary is buying more of it. And frankly, they have a point. There is no actual shortage in the market. Russia is still producing the same quantity of gas. Their pipelines are still intact. Their contracts are still legal. So if Europe wants to, they can have a warm and comfortable winter. And that's what Hungary is doing. The only difference is they're doing it openly. Others are being more shady about it. Like Italy. Their largest oil refinery is located in Sicily. It is owned by Russia's Lukoil. Now, last month, the European Union banned Russian oil. They agreed to stop imports by the end of 2022. So Russia's oil sales to every European country came down. Every country except Italy. Italy is receiving 400,000 barrels per day from Russia. Almost 4 times the pre-invasion levels. Why is that? Because nobody is lending to the Sicily refinery. European banks don't want to do business with a Russian company. So what does the refinery do? They fall back on Russian oil. Before the invasion, this refinery was processing 15% of Russian crude. Now it's 100%. Another culprit is Estonia. All of a sudden, they're selling oil to Saudi Arabia, of all places. They shipped 3 cargoes in the months of May and June. Compare that to the last 2 years. Estonia only shipped 2 cargoes in 2020 and 2021. Strange, isn't it? Do you know what's even stranger? Estonia does not even have a single oil refinery. So where exactly is this oil coming from? Experts say it's coming from Russia. Estonia bought 8 million barrels from Russia in the first 5 months of 2022. Now they're offloading it to Saudi Arabia. So much for EU solidarity. The fact is, European Union cannot decide how to take on Russia. Some members are not sure if they want to do it at all. Like French President Emmanuel Macron, he's hoping to repair ties with Russia one day. Perhaps when the war is over, whenever it's over. There's a similar statement in Germany and Italy, in Germany and Italy. They want to support Ukraine, but they're not sure about taking on Russia. It's a sort of a paradoxical policy. The current gas crisis has exposed this faulty thinking. It has revealed how unsustainable the European experiment is. In fact, leave policy aside. Just focus on the statements. Estonia's Prime Minister called Putin a habitual liar. French President Macron says, don't humiliate Putin. Such open differences make the European Union ineffective, a superpower in theory, a sitting duck in practice. Speaking of which, let's talk about Mario Draghi, now the former Prime Minister of Italy. He stepped down on Thursday after his coalition fell apart. Italy will now hold snap polls and elect a new Prime Minister. Who is it going to be? As per opinion polls, it could be Giorgia Meloni, a far-right leader who once served in a party that was founded by Benito Mussolini. And the party she belongs to right now is also filled with Mussolini loyalists, or people who subscribe to his ideas. Lawmakers who want to govern Italy according to Mussolini's playbook. One of them is Rachel Mussolini, the granddaughter of the dictator. So could this party and these lawmakers really come to power in Italy? What are their chances? Here's a report.
These were Mario Draghi's final moments as the Prime Minister of Italy. A round of roaring applause cutting across party lines. Surprised to receive such a tribute, Draghi, a former chief of Europe's central bank, joked that even central bankers get emotional at times.
Certe volte anche il cuore dei banchieri centrali viene usato qualche volta. Ma grazie per questo.
The farewell may have been ceremonious, but the end of Draghi's tenure was undignified to say the least. He was forced to resign after his allies turned against him. You see, Draghi's government was in essence a technocracy, an umbrella coalition of technical experts representing parties from the right, the left and the centre. In 2021, they came together to help Italy recover from the pandemic. As the virus came under control, the coalition unravelled. The cracks appeared and became wider. There were disagreements on fiscal policies, disputes over political decisions. A no-confidence vote was held last week. Draghi won the vote, but lost his allies. At least 3 parties in the ruling coalition boycotted the vote. This doomed any prospects for his unity government's survival. The coalition fell apart. Mario Draghi had to quit. On Wednesday, he made an emotional appeal for unity as he resigned.
All'Italia non serve una fiducia di facciata.
Italy doesn't need superficial stability, which disappears when confronted with difficult measures. Italy needs a new pact of trust, as sincere and concrete as the one that has allowed us to change the country for the better so far.
I partiti e voi parlamentari.
So what happens next? Italy goes to polls again. On the 25th of September, the country will hold snap elections. Who is expected to win them? It's hard to say, but one far-right party has the edge. It's leading the opinion polls at 24%. They call it the Brothers of Italy Party. It's a conservative and populist party led by 45-year-old Giorgia Meloni. Interestingly, Meloni once served in the Italian social movement, a party founded by Benito Mussolini, the Italian dictator credited for giving birth to fascism. Mussolini's granddaughter is also a part of the Brothers of Italy. Her name, Rachel Mussolini, a lawmaker who sits on Rome's municipal council. In fact, the entire party is filled with Mussolini nostalgists. They want to rediscuss the Eurozone's treaties. They have a zero-tolerance policy on immigration. They preach boosting the birth rate of Italians. They oppose same-sex parenting and often take part in anti-LGBT demonstrations. Could this party and its lawmakers come to power? Is Italy about to be governed by Mussolini's playbook again? We shall find out in 2 months.
Wars have always reshaped the world order. They create new financial systems, new political alliances, new trading blocs. But to build new systems, old ones must be toppled. In Ukraine, one such monolith could be collapsing: the Russian war machine. For years, it was considered invincible. They had the largest nuclear arsenal in the world. They inherited the best Soviet weapons. In fact, the military was Russia's claim to power. Just think about it. Russia's economy is only the 11th largest in the world, yet Vladimir Putin had a seat at every important table. Why is that? Because of Russia's impressive military. But the Ukraine war is changing that perception. First, they failed to capture Kiev. Now they're facing stiff resistance in the Donbass, so obviously questions will be asked. Was the Russian war machine just a paper tiger? According to these numbers, there's a good case to be made. Russia is said to have lost around 1,600 tanks in Ukraine, at least 50 helicopters, 36 fighter bombers, and 350 artillery pieces. Now, full disclosure, these are US intelligence figures. We cannot independently verify them, so take it with a pinch of salt. Having said that, some of these failures were also caught on camera. You might remember the stranded Russian tanks outside Kiev. Some of them ran out of fuel, others had engine trouble. So soldiers had to park those tanks along the road. Not exactly superpower material. For every weapon Russia lost or loses, it must send replacements. That's the unseen part of every war, the industrial work that goes into fighting a war. Every great military power has a robust industrial base. Nazi Germany had it. The Soviet Union had it. The United States has too much of it. Now, Russia's military industrial base is important for two reasons. Number one, it gives Russia a battlefield advantage, or at least it was supposed to. And number two, it props up the Russian economy. Let me show you some more numbers. Russia is the second largest weapons exporter in the world. They supply equipment to 66 countries. 66. They have technical deals with 85 countries. Put together, Russia makes up 20% of the global arms trade. Total income, almost $46 billion. That's a lot of money. Inside Russia, the defense industry is extremely powerful. It employs 2 million people. That's almost 2.7% of Russia's labor force. And right now, they're laser focused on one thing: beating Ukraine. Most of the production is calibrated to battlefield requirements. The result is this: exports are lagging behind, especially in Africa. It is one of the biggest markets for Russian arms. Algeria makes up 15% of Russia's sales. Egypt makes up 11%. Ethiopia, Nigeria, Mali, all these countries get weapons from Russia. That trade could now be in jeopardy. US officials believe Russian deliveries will be delayed, that their production capacity has fallen considerably. On paper, this assumption makes sense. Western sanctions are making it impossible for Russia to acquire parts like guidance systems, like microchips or trackers. These are usually bought from outside, and without them, Russia cannot manufacture weapons. This could be a huge blow to Moscow's foreign policy goals. Their idea was to sway Africa with weapons. And so far, the plan was working. In 2013, the United States cut off military aid to Egypt. This was after the military coup. Immediately, Russia swooped in to fill that vacuum. Same in Nigeria. The US imposed an arms embargo in 2014, so Russia supplied Mi-35 helicopters to Nigeria. The question is, can they keep up? Other military players are already waiting on the sidelines. The United States, France, China. Earlier today, Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi arrived in Paris. He is expected to discuss defense ties with President Macron. So African countries are looking for options. And why not? Defense is, after all, a buyer's market. And every buyer wants to check two boxes. One is quick and seamless delivery. The second is maintenance and repairs. Can Russia guarantee those in the middle of a war? That is a big question. We are already hearing reports of delays. like the S-400 missile systems, the one that India bought. India was supposed to get the second S-400 shipment this year, but reports say it has been delayed. Another example is the Sukhoi Checkmate. It was supposed to be a fifth-generation fighter jet, Russia's reply to America's F-35 jets. Production was scheduled to begin in 2025, but now it has been pushed back. The Sukhoi Checkmate will begin production in 2027. None of this bodes well for Russia's defense industry. It may not be a paper tiger like the West claims, but it's also not the world-conquering successor to the Soviet Red Army. Our next story is from the International Space Station, a place, fortunately, devoid of earthly disputes so far. The war in Ukraine has not marred cooperation on board the ISS. A recent spacewalk comes as proof. On Thursday, an Italian astronaut joined a Russian cosmonaut for a spacewalk. They embarked on a mission together to install a robotic adapter on the ISS. Here's more.
The war in Ukraine has entered its 148th day. The Russian juggernaut is moving ahead. Ukraine and Europe are trying to resist. On ground, the two sides may be enemies. But 400 kilometers above Earth, this rivalry is all but non-existent. Welcome to the International Space Station, a spacecraft devoid of earthly disputes. Americans, Russians, Italians, they're all getting along fine up here. As tensions over Ukraine ricochet back home, a recent spacewalk came as a reminder. On Thursday, an Italian astronaut aboard the ISS joined a Russian cosmonaut for a spacewalk, a rare show of unity.
Samantha Cristoforetti in your field of view.
Look at these images. This is flight engineer Samantha Cristoforetti from Italy and Commander Oleg Artemyev from Russia installing a robotic arm adapter on the ISS.
Okay, I'm tethered with this one. So they told us to turn on the satellite in advance.
The operation lasted 6.5 hours. There wasn't even a trace of disagreement. Interestingly, Cristoforetti also became the first European woman astronaut to embark on a spacewalk, a feat she achieved with assistance from the station's commander, Artemyev, a 6-time spacewalker and a Russian. This episode is quite telling. It shows how the ISS is yet to become a frontier, how differences on Earth are yet to spill over into space. A few weeks back, the European Space Agency refused to collaborate with Russia for a lunar mission. A month prior, it suspended a joint mission to Mars with the Russians. Fortunately, the ISS has remained untouched from the politics. There are currently 3 Americans, 3 Russians, and 1 Italian working together despite the differences. Here's hoping things remain that way.
What happens during times of war? There's a mismatch in the demand and supply of food, so prices go up. It's called inflation. Most of you know this already. What about heatflation? Have you heard of this term? Heatflation. It's actually self-explanatory. It is inflation driven by heat. When food prices go up because of extreme heat, it's called heatflation. What's happening now in Europe, for example, it is 40 degrees in the UK, 42 in France. The continent is on fire. Acres and acres of land are burning in the UK, France, Greece, Spain and Portugal. Also going up in flames are crops. If not burnt by wildfire, food crops are being damaged by extreme heat and drought. And that's heatflation for you. In Italy, the agricultural fields have become dry. The soil has lost its water content. A drought emergency has been declared in at least 5 regions. 30 to 40% of the country's seasonal harvest is under threat. Spain, Romania and France are Europe's top 3 corn producers. 2 of these countries are battling extreme heat. And this heat is baking corn crops. Corn production is expected to drop significantly. And what happens when production drops? It affects the supply chain. It triggers an inflation, or in this case, a heatflation. I'm sure most of you know that our crops are vulnerable to heat. But did you know cattle too suffer from heat stress? Extreme heat affects milk production. Also, when it's too hot outside, chicken lay fewer eggs. Fewer eggs equal to higher egg prices and higher need for importing eggs. Ultimately, a mismatch in the global demand and supply chain of eggs. Also, you don't need to be sitting close to a wildfire to feel heatflation. Your country may not even be experiencing extreme heat, but heatflation will make its way to your breakfast table. It may force you to pay more for meals, for meat. Pork, for example. It's a staple in China. Last month, temperature in parts of China breached the 40°C mark. What do you think happened? Crops were hit. I'm talking about corn crops, soybean, wheat. Now, soybean and corn are used to feed pigs. When their prices shot up, so did the prices of pork. By the first week of July, hog prices were up 46% against March. So that's heatflation for you. It is one of the many problems our world is currently battling. It's also something that we could have totally done without. The global economy is already in a very bad shape. Prices of commodities have shot through the roof. In the US, for example, price of chicken is up 20% year on year. Same with flour. Food production too has become expensive. Fertilizer prices are up almost 100%. In Africa, it is 300%. How will people sustain themselves? France has just passed a $20 billion package. The idea is to help poor families cope with inflation. In fact, every country is doing what it can to control growing prices. Most central banks are continuously increasing interest rates. Why? To try and control the soaring inflation. The European Central Bank has hiked interest rates for the first time in 11 years. They've increased it by 50 basis points, 0.5%. That makes the interest rate 0.0%. I don't know how many of you know this. But the ECB, European Central Bank, has kept a negative interest rate since 2014. Do you know why? To boost the Eurozone's economy, because desperate times call for desperate measures. Reuters reports that the US Federal Reserve is also expected to further hike its interest rate, the 75 basis point hike. It could come next week. In Ukraine, the country's central bank has lowered the GDP forecast for the current financial year. It would have been news had they not. Now, this says Ukraine's growth could shrink by a third this year. A research firm called GfK recently conducted a survey in the UK. It found that the country's consumer confidence is at its lowest point in 48 years. Remember, inflation in the UK has hit a 40-year high. One can only expect the graph to go up further given the extreme heat and wildfires. Back in Asia, Japan has recorded its slowest manufacturing growth in 10 months. Factory activity has also slowed down in Australia. So that's the state of the global economy. Like I said, a heatflation is the last thing we need right now. The global economy is precariously poised, but one country could already be facing a recession, and that is China. GDP growth has dropped below 1% there. Bad loans are putting Chinese banks in trouble. Depositors have lost their savings. Thousands of citizens are boycotting their mortgages. They're not paying that money. All this damage is self-inflicted, a result of poor choices and poor policies by the Chinese state and the constant meddling of the Communist Party. It truly knows no bounds. I'll give you the latest example. HSBC is one of the world's biggest banks. You must have heard about it. HSBC. It has set up a Communist Party committee within the organization, a full-fledged Communist Party unit in HSBC, the bank. Now, HSBC is a London-based bank, but it makes most of its revenues in Hong Kong and mainland China. That's where the CCP unit is going to be based. This is according to a recent report, and it's a significant move. HSBC is the first foreign lender to China to install a CCP committee within the company. The bank has issued a statement. It says it played no role in setting this up and that the committee does not influence the business activities. Even then, it's being seen as a big deal, and I'll explain why. Chinese companies law requires businesses to set up party units within their firm. But this rule was never really enforced. It was there on paper always. It seems HSBC, despite being a foreign lender, has decided to comply anyway, or has been asked to comply. And the reason for that is simple. It wants a favorable working environment in China. It wants to remain committed to the Chinese market, which is a big market for it. Now, if you're doing business in China, you need the support of the Communist Party. And that's where the CCP Committee comes in. Who are the members of this committee? On paper, the criteria is quite simple. They must be members of the Communist Party and they must be employees of the organization. That's the CCP Committee for you. If there are even 3 such candidates in a company, they could join hands and they could form a committee. But sometimes Beijing's invisible hand is at play. More often than not, it is. Allow me to explain with a hypothetical situation. Say you're an important company. So Beijing will take a special interest in you. The Communist Party will nominate a member. And this member will be installed in the top ranks of the company, say as a director or a member of the management. That's how the Communist Party gets into boardrooms. The CCP committees are basically an extension of the Chinese state. And they are the representatives of the Chinese state in the Chinese private sector. That's how they control businesses. The benefits of that are obvious. It ensures diktats from Beijing are followed to the T. It helps Beijing influence business decisions, even in the private sector. It ensures Chinese interests are protected at all times. And this is not a new idea. It has been around for years. Chinese companies already have CCP committees. I have some numbers. These are from 2017. Close to 1.9 million private companies in China were studied. 1.9 million. Out of these, 70% had a Communist Party unit. What about foreign companies? In 2016, 75,000 foreign companies had party cells. That was 71% of all foreign enterprises in China. They had representatives of the Communist Party. But there was an unease over having a Communist Party member in the boardroom. HSBC's move could change that sentiment. Experts believe foreign banks will be under pressure now. They could be forced to follow suit. Having a Communist Party cell could now become compulsory to do business in China. British lawmakers are criticizing this move by HSBC. Remember, the company is headquartered in London. So HSBC is facing heat back home. What do the British lawmakers say? They've called this development worrying. They've criticized HSBC's what they call lack of judgment. Can they force the bank to shut down the CCP committee? There's no word on that. If this happened in the developing world, the West would have lectured the government in question. There would have been unsolicited advice about choosing values over profits and so on and so forth. Will the West now follow its own advice? We'll have to wait and see how this goes. And that's enough politics and economics. Our next story is about a grand ecological comeback in India. I'm talking about the cheetah, the fastest animal on land. In 1952, the cheetah was declared extinct in India, but pretty soon that could change. India and Namibia have struck a deal to revive India's cheetah population. 8 big cats will soon arrive in the country. Our next report tells you what India plans to do with them.
Blink and you'll miss them. These lean hunting machines are the fastest animals on land. The cheetah. Their top speed is almost 113 kilometers per hour. You will find them prowling the arid lands of Africa, Iran, and pretty soon, India. The cheetah holds an ignominious record in India. It is the only large mammal to go extinct since the country's independence. That was way back in 1952. Hunting and habitat loss were the major reasons. Now, almost 7 decades later, the cheetah is making a comeback. 8 wildcats from Namibia are set to arrive in India. They will roam the Kuno Palpur National Park in the central Indian state of Madhya Pradesh. It is the first step in a long and ambitious project. The end goal is to multiply the population, to create a thriving big cat presence in the forests of India. For that, Namibia's role will be crucial. Only 7,000 cheetahs remain in the wild today, and Namibia is home to the largest population. Their government agreed to relocate the cheetahs after careful scrutiny.
We do not allow our wildlife to go into any country if the environment is not the same, and if they are not able to give it the treatment that is required. And when now the Indian scientists met all the requirements, that's when now a decision is finally taken that we'll be able to export those cheetahs. And we are really hopeful that the Indian people will take care of those animals.
India's Environment Minister hailed the decision. He said the cheetah's arrival would rekindle the ecological dynamics of the landscape. It would also be a redemption of sorts. Decades ago, Asiatic cheetahs roamed this vast stretch of land, all the way from the Arabian Peninsula to Afghanistan. Today, they only survive in Iran. According to government estimates, just 12 of them. In the 1970s, India made an effort to bring the cheetah back. At that time, Iran had around 300 of them, but fate had other plans. The Shah of Iran was deposed in the Iranian Revolution. India's wait for the cheetah would continue. In 2020, there was progress yet again. India's Supreme Court greenlit the reintroduction of the cheetah, but they had one condition. It must be done in a carefully chosen location. Indian officials spent the next 2 years searching for the perfect spot. They found it here, in the heart of India, the Kuno-Palpur National Park. India's Cheetah project isn't just based on nostalgia or a failed dream. It is also based on robust scientific objectives. India's tiger conservation mission is among the most successful in the world. The hope is to replicate that with the cheetah, to make the fastest animal on land feel at home in India. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
It's Friday and a lot of you, I'm guessing, have shopping plans for the weekend. Now tell me one thing. What's that one tag you look at when you pick up a dress? Price tag, I'm guessing. What if the clothes also came with a climate tag? Would you care to look at it before buying that garment? A climate tag. France is proposing one such tag by 2023, that is next year. Every piece of garment sold in France will come with a climate impact tag. It will tell you how the garment has impacted the climate, whether the factory it was made in used solar power or was it fired by coal. How many gallons of water went into making that cotton shirt? What is the distance it traveled? What is the shirt's carbon footprint? What kind of dye was used? How did that color affect the planet? And how much more will it pollute the earth every time that shirt is washed? All of these data points will be at your disposal. Well, France is yet to make up its mind on what this climate tag will look like. But the idea is clear. It is to help consumers make informed choices. Also induce a sense of guilt, I think. It's bound to. It's bound to pinch a little if your shopping cart reeks of deforestation. What have trees to do with clothes, you ask, and I will tell you. Have you heard of viscose and rayon? These are fabrics. In fact, they make up 5% of the fabric industry. And guess what? 30% of rayon and viscose is made up from wood pulp. A lot of it comes from endangered trees. Did you know 120 million trees are cut every year to make our clothes? You see, there isn't much awareness when it comes to the cost of fashion. Viscose, for example, is extremely polluting. In most viscose factories, 50% of the material goes to waste, and that waste pollutes the earth. Cotton doesn't fare much better. It's good for your skin, yes, but has an insatiable appetite for water. In Uzbekistan, 50 years of cotton farming dried up the Aral Sea. It takes 2,700 liters of water to make one cotton shirt. That's the amount of water a person drinks in 900 days. What about denims? It takes nearly 4,000 liters of water to make one pair of denims. Now, how many of us knew this? How many of you knew this? France's move is aimed at spreading this awareness, at making people aware of the consequences of their actions. Climate tags will also encourage sustainable fashion. So let me ask you another question. How many times do you wear one shirt or one dress? Today, most of us avoid repeating clothes. We're scared of a fashion faux pas or being out of trend. As recently as the 20th century, the fashion industry had 4 seasons a year: fall, winter, spring, summer. The styles would change with every season. Cut to 2022, style changes every week. One day, neutral colors are in fashion, but before you realize it, polka dots have taken over the stores. One day, every Instagram influencer is wearing wide-legged denims. The next, they're flaunting teal-colored pants. Today, fashion houses have 52 micro-seasons a year. There's one new collection every week, and every week people flock to the malls. They scroll through online outlets to remain in style, but what is the cost of this style? What happens to last season's clothes? They're thrown away. The fashion industry produces 53 million tons of fiber every year. 70% of it is thrown away. It ends up in garbage dumps. In India alone, 1 million tons of textiles are thrown away every year. These clothes are replaced by in-season clothes, a lot of which are shipped in from different parts of the world. Did you know the greenhouse gas emissions by the textile industry are more than that of shipping and travel industries combined? With a climate label, you would know. You would know the environmental cost of fashion. Like I mentioned, by 2023, all clothes sold in France will have such labels, climate labels. And by 2026, the rest of the European Union will follow suit. The idea is great, but what about its implementation? Is it possible to trace the climate impact of every garment? The answer is no. Several fashion houses boast of sustainable fashion, eco-friendly fashion, conscious fashion. But the EU Commission says 42% of green claims are false or deceptive. Plus, there's mislabeling. In 2015, several top companies were caught claiming that their rayon is made from bamboo. They were asked to cough up $1.3 million. We've also seen marketing gimmicks, like the one employed by Zara. Some of its clothes came with a Join Life tag. What the brand did not tell its customers is that only the tag was stamped eco-friendly, not the garment. Another thing about green claims is that they're very hard to verify. So to France and its ambitious climate label, we wish all the best. With that, let's take a look at what else is making news across the world. This is Gravitas Global Headlines.
Beijing voices a strong protest against Lithuania for welcoming a Taiwanese delegation on a visit, claiming it violated the One China policy. The UN's highest court rules that a landmark case filed by Gambia accusing Myanmar of genocide of minority Rohingya Muslims can proceed. Mali's army says it has thwarted a terrorist attack on a town on the outskirts of the capital, where a key base used by the ruling military is located. In the latest 24 hours, 26 people died from COVID in New Zealand as the country battles a new wave of the Omicron strain that is particularly affecting the older population. Prince Harry wins a bid to bring a High Court challenge against the British Interior Ministry over his security arrangements. Operators of the English Channel port of Dover accuse French border officials of ruining the start to the summer getaway, blaming understaffing for hours-long queues. Japan's nuclear regulator formally approves a plan to release more than 1 million tons of treated water from the crippled Fukushima plant into the ocean, sparking an angry reaction from China. Twitter reports disappointing results, a miss that the social network attributed to headwinds, including the uncertainty related to Elon Musk's buyout bid.
With that, it's a wrap. We're leaving you with Gravitas Images. Thanks for watching. Have a good weekend.
stay connected.